I call the Aleppo Township meeting of June 20, 2022 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
President Jones.
Present.
Vice President Williams.
Present.
Commissioner Dara.
Present.
Commissioner Haluka. Present. Solicitor Stone.
Here.
And Manager Patterson. Here.
These meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube and can be watched anytime, any place. I'll now turn it over to our solicitor for the public hearing.
What we're going to do tonight is we're going to hold a hearing to discuss and to consider adopting a new zoning ordinance. Actually, it's a comprehensive amendment, a review of our existing ordinance. But to explain and to demonstrate what some of the differences are between the old ordinance and the new ordinance, we've asked our consultant to be here tonight, and we'll open our hearing with a short presentation by Laura Ludwig of HRG Engineering, who is a certified urban municipal planner, and who has spent the last, I'd say, close to a year, if not a year or more.
Yeah.
It's about a year.
A little over a year. We kicked off February of 2021. So.
Working with the township and with the planning commission to arrive at what we hope will be a final draft of our proposed ordinance. That said, we're required by law under the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code to hold a public hearing and to permit public comment prior to adopting the ordinance. And so that's the purpose of tonight's hearing. After Laura has made her presentation, we will recognize anybody who wishes to speak either in favor of or in opposition to the proposed ordinance. And of course, Laura will answer any questions that you have regarding the changes and you know, why the Planning Commission has decided to go the direction they have. And there will also be an opportunity for the commissioners at some point tonight to address any questions they have to Laura regarding the proposed ordinance. Copies of that ordinance have been advertised. A summary of the proposed ordinance has been advertised. Also which is also a requirement of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. As part of tonight's hearing, we'll introduce proofs of publication for the record. I would also point out that in addition to complying with the Pennsylvania law, we are also under a contractual obligation in a agreement with two of our neighboring municipalities, Glen Osborne Borough and Sewickley Borough, as their partners in our joint comprehensive plan. And so we have notice requirements that we have to provide them with so many days' notice before we can adopt the ordinance. And we will also make letters to Glen Osborne and to Sewickley Borough and make those also part of tonight's record as exhibits. So with that, I think I will turn this hearing over to Laura. As I said, Laura is a certified municipal planner. She's worked with us, like I said, for almost a year or more, and it's the result of her hard labor and that of the Planning Commission that has brought us to this point. So Laura, why don't you present what you have?
Awesome. You have my slides. Yeah, there we go. Perfect, thank you. So as Harlan mentioned, my name is Laura Ludwig. I'm a senior community planner and also the group manager of planning and design group at HRG, who also serves as the township engineer. So we've been working for the better part of a year and a half now, almost on this very comprehensive zoning ordinance and zoning map update. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we kicked off this process in February of last year. The Township Planning Commission held 6 review sessions with HRG. And discussions at its regular monthly meetings throughout 2021. And then we also had several staff review sessions with staff from HRG. Harlan was present, and also Gwen, the township manager. We also held a key stakeholder meeting to review and discuss the draft ordinance with some sort of key property owners and stakeholders, and gathered some feedback from them before we finalized the draft that was then sent to Allegheny County for review and put on public display. So, this was a very comprehensive update. We tried to modernize the ordinance. We updated the zoning map a little bit. Obviously, the uses table, we added a lot of various use terms that maybe weren't in there before. And this is really to account for various, trends that we see as consultants when we work in municipalities throughout the state and the region specifically, for myself, in Western Pennsylvania. So things, and really the township had sort of a list of issues that they wanted us to address as part of the update as well. So some of the newer things you might see in there are, language around short-term rentals, sport courts, regulations for some of those, animals in terms of, the very popular backyard chickens. There's also some stuff in there on apiaries and beekeeping. We updated the noise regulations, added regulations for accessory dwelling units. The list really does go on, so that's a very just brief overview. So some of the zoning map updates, we did remove Weber's Corner Village Zoning District from the map. We talked a lot about this with the Planning Commission members, and just really felt like that didn't really fit. It wasn't really something that was going to be achievable. But then when we looked closer at that old village district and kind of looked at Glen Mitchell Road, that's when we thought maybe something like a mixed-use district would work there. It's more reflective of really the existing mix of uses that are already present on that road, some of which, the non-residential uses are grandfathered in, but we thought that would allow for some flexibility for really just smaller scale commercial and then residential uses to kind of continue to coexist along that roadway. The Swickley Heights Manor PRD was added, and that's really just a technicality. Its zoning didn't really change. It was just identifying the PRD as an actual PRD, which is something that county planning recommends. So anytime you have any PRD, it should be shown on your zoning map as, the name of it approved and the PRD. And then we did, in 2020, we added an amendment for the parking overlay, and that overlay language from 2020 was brought into this comprehensive zoning update. And then we did change a few of the zoning districts in terms of residential. Just some parcels were adjusted, but R1, R2, and R3 essentially, in terms of purpose and whatnot of those districts remain relatively the same. You can go to the next slide. So R1 still is the lower density housing. R2 is sort of higher density, would include Masonic Village, and some of the neighboring parcels sort of adjacent and around that, and a couple other areas. And then R3 is still the more rural residential that sort of encompasses a lot of the agricultural activities. And the main differences really between those three are maybe certain dwelling types allowed and how those are allowed, whether it be permitted by right or conditional, and then some of the area and bulk requirements such as lot widths, certain setbacks or lot coverage percentages that might be allowed will differ between some of those districts. Go to the next slide. So this is the updated zoning map that I know has been on the website We did have one correction to this. I think the updated one was added today. There was a parcel that was split zoned along Glen Mitchell Road that was updated to be fully mixed use. Other than that, those are the changes. We left the natural resource protection overlay as is, the parking overlay as is, and the airport hazard overlay requirements remain the same. This is just a picture of the uses table. So a lot of the items in the current zoning ordinance were not in tables, so there were just like lists of the permitted uses, and then a list, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, of the accessory uses or conditional uses. So we combined all of that into one big table that is several pages long, but is sort of like your one-stop shop to where you can find all of that information. Same with the area and bulk requirements of each district. So as I mentioned, the ordinance was modernized a great bit. We added a lot of various terms and definitions that maybe weren't there prior, again, just to account for various zoning trends that we see as consultants. We had extensive meetings, I would say, with the Planning Commission. I know one meeting we only got from A to D, and I was like, okay, we need to think of a better way to get through these uses in this use table. But we did also remove certain uses that we felt were outdated, or certain terms, or something that was covered under maybe a newer term. And then for future, you know, PRD was actually removed from the ordinance entirely. So, you know, there's no requirements now for PRDs, so a new PRD could not come in here. And then we added, so a lot of the newer uses, the trends really are to allow some of those as conditional uses. And allow the Board of Commissioners to ultimately decide, you know, the conditions for which, you know, and criteria for which those uses can be approved in the township. So there's a whole article, Article 4, that's devoted to all the conditional use criteria for conditional uses as a whole, and then each individual conditional use. So if it has a C anywhere in the use chart, it would then have criteria within that article. And we do account for the shared uses with the neighboring municipalities of Swickley and Glen Osborne boroughs. So through that joint ASO plan, they are allowed to share certain uses. So if a use might not be included in Aleppo Townships, it may be able to go elsewhere in either Swickley or Glen Osborne. And then if a use is not listed, there's other criteria for which it would have to meet. And those would be allowed as a conditional use in the C2 district, specifically only that district. And then, like I mentioned, the area and bulk tables were also added. I don't think we adjusted, I think we adjusted a little bit some of the requirements. But each table for each district, zoning district specifically, can be found within Article 3 of the new ordinance. Thank you. So just in terms of next steps, happy to answer any questions anyone has. We did submit the draft ordinance to the county and received a review letter back. We will be addressing some of their comments. Harlan, Gwen, and I have met and reviewed those. Some other HRG staff has reviewed those. The neighboring communities of Swickley and Glen Osborne are also reviewing the draft ordinance as well as part of the joint ASO plan and agreement. They have some additional time to review those. So we'll be making, like I said, some very minor edits and changes based on what the county review letter stated, and then we'll be resubmitting and I guess re-putting it on public display, right, Harlan, at some point?
Right, and
So, because we have time to do that because of the joint ASO plan and those
so we're
stipulations.
required by law to
Yeah.
allow 45 days after the hearing, before we actually vote whether to adopt or not adopt. So the target date now for actually adopting the ordinance is August 15th. And we would hold it won't be another hearing, but we will consider the ordinance for purposes of adoption at that meeting that night. So again, I just want to make it clear that we will not be voting tonight on anything. The purpose of tonight is to roll this out, so to speak, and give you all a chance to comment.
And that's really all I have in terms of slides. So again, if there's a specific issue that anyone has a question about or wants to hash out in more detail, certainly able to do that here this evening.
I have a question. Can I tell you my name?
Yeah, why don't you, so I'll actually run the hearing
Okay.
at this point, so just stand up, give your name and your address, and then fire away.
My name's Jerry Vescio. I'm not a resident of Aleppo, but I own property in Aleppo. I live in Swickley. I just have one question about the one designation where it says Natural Resource Protection Zone. Can you explain what that is?
Sure, and that's actually a
Don't know if I've seen
provision,
that before.
it's in your existing, it's
Is
in the
it?
existing
Okay.
ordinance. Yes, we did not change anything in relation to that, we kept everything in. So it just adds some additional regulations for, you know, a potential developer to meet if they were going to develop there. So there's some steep slopes, like there's some natural sort of environmental issues, so it just kind of adds an extra layer of just, you know, requirements that would need to be met
And
in order to build in that, within that open
those
zone.
criteria would then all obviously be attached to or included in whatever
It's in the ordinance.
the ordinance tells you.
Absolutely. And most of it, not all of it, but most of it is focused on development within steep slopes.
Sure.
There's grading issues, and and the way it's come up in the last decade or so has been usually in connection with development in a steep slope area.
Mhm. Yeah, and we did not, we kept everything as is within that section, we didn't change anything.
Thank you.
And with Walmart and all kinds of other soils issues in this area, we have to be very careful of that.
Sure.
No one?
I have a question.
Art,
Art
yes.
Capuzzi. This,
Address.
Weber Road, 352 Weber Road. Excuse me. This joint ASO, I'm a little confused about it. If it's in another municipality, how does this trio affect one zoning?
Okay, I can answer that. Years ago, the county adopted, adopted a provision, I think it was in the MPC, where it allowed communities to enter into one joint comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan, as opposed to your zoning ordinance, is more or less your vision statement of what you see as far as the future development in your municipality, in your township. So years ago, Aleppo and what was then Osborne and is today known as Glen Osborne and Sewickley actually in a very foresighted way took advantage of that new development option and said, yeah, I mean, we share a very similar geographic space, and it's interesting that a lot of our development needs are complementary to one another. So whereas Sewickley has a very heavy commercial and a business district, that makes them sort of special that way. Glen Osborne, for the most part, is residential and is primarily a bedroom community of Sewickley, or grew up that way. And Aleppo, initially, as you probably know, was a lot of farms and was very agricultural, but to some extent has changed because of the industrial park and some of the development. But there's also the potential for but more future development in Aleppo than there is in Sewickley and Glen Osborne. So the premise of this project was we each have something to offer the other, and so why do we need to have a zoning map which says the same thing for every community? And so the beauty of what's known as joint comprehensive planning is, number one, it's not joint zoning, so you still have your own zoning ordinance, you still have control of your zoning through your own zoning hearing board, but the joint comprehensive plan gives you the opportunity to say, if we don't have this use, so, for example, adult bookstores, okay, there are a lot of what we call noxious uses that nobody wants to take, but everyone has to have one. So what we kind of did with the joint comprehensive plan is, to the extent you had to have a bad use, we kind of divvied that up a little bit. So, I can't give you specific examples in this ordinance, but again, the principle is that if that use is not provided for in Sewickley, it doesn't mean that Sewickley's ordinance is bad. It just means it might be in Aleppo, or it might be provided for in Glen Osborne. So the joint comprehensive concept gives you the ability to share the uses that are provided for in a neighboring ordinance. By sharing, you don't all have to have the same thing. Okay, make sense?
That makes
That's
sense,
the
but-
concept.
Excuse me. If the other municipalities want to do something and they can't, or something with zoning, and they approach us about it, are we required to entertain that? Or, so
No.
we still have our autonomy?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's like I said. So again, I don't mean to give you a course on zoning and planning,
Yeah,
but there is a difference between your comprehensive plan and your zoning ordinance and the procedures that you follow. So by having a joint comprehensive plan, you are not giving anybody else control over your zoning, nor are they getting control over your zoning. You're just saying that if we don't provide for a certain type of use, it might be in Sewickley or it might be in Glen Osborne, and vice versa. But you don't have to ask permission. We went through this for really, it was a very exhaustive analysis, but you don't have to ask permission to change your zoning. But you do have to give them notice if you're adding or subtracting a use from your map.
you don't have to do it if you increase or decrease that zoning?
No, if you're all the time we spent producing this ordinance, right, this zoning ordinance, the only thing that Sewickley and Glen Osborne would be concerned about is if we added uses, which we did, or subtracted uses, which we did, and we solicit their, just like we solicit citizen input, we solicit their input on those things. However, there's, hundreds of pages here not dealing with uses at all, but dealing with setback requirements, dealing with bulk setbacks. There's all kinds of zoning that really is not related to use. It's more about what we call it details on what you can build, how far away from your neighbor, access roads, what you have to provide for. So none of that gets touched by Sewickley or Osborne as part of joint comprehensive zoning. Am I
Yes. no,
making that?
Totally understand it.
And that's a good question, because when people do or enter into joint comprehensive planning, that's one of the biggest concerns they have, which is, are we giving up our autonomy? Are we giving up our control of our zoning? And the answer is no.
All right. R1 single family, does that include townhouses connected to each other?
I'm going to let Laura address that because it's more substantive, but If it's a legal question, I'll handle it, but I'm gonna let Laura answer
All
that.
right, Laura?
So within the R1 district, the types of dwelling units that are permitted by right are duplex, a manufactured or modular home, a single-family dwelling, and a two-family dwelling. So it doesn't include like quadruplexes, townhomes, and then we have definitions for all of those.
So the duplex is just a double dwelling, sitting singularly by itself, not connected to any other building.
I can tell you specifically.
That's right.
A detached house designed for and occupied exclusively as not more than 2 units, each living as an independent housekeeping unit and with no internal connectivity between units.
Okay,
So,
thank you. A little later in that, you said something about a two-family dwelling.
Two-family, yep, yep, I can tell you what that is too. It's slightly different. A residential building containing 2 independent dwelling units, each having a separate entrance and which is the only principal building on the lot.
So basically a duplex.
So they're similar.
Okay.
What's the difference between a duplex and a townhouse?
Oh, excuse me,
Yes.
I need your name before you talk. Sorry.
Dawn.
Yes.
Yeah, she needs your name and address.
Name, name and address.
Dawn, lot 362 Weber.
A townhouse, you can have multiple units attached that share a wall. So a townhouse is a single-family dwelling unit, not more than 3.5 stories in height, constructed in a group of not less than 3 but not more than 8 attached units, in which each unit shares no more than one common wall that extends from the foundation to the roof. And I believe townhouses are only permitted in all of the 2. Conditional. Just double check. Yeah, they're permitted by right in R2 and then conditional in mixed use.
They're permitted in R2.
Yes.
Okay, Don, maybe I'll just jump in here for a sec. Does everyone understand the difference between a permitted use and a conditional use?
Not totally.
Okay, so maybe I'll take a second and do that. So lots of uses, so there are 3 uses that the municipality's planning code uses or provides for. One's a permitted use. A permitted use is a use by right. So if that use is permitted in that district and that's what you want to do, all you have to do is come in, get a building permit, and get an occupancy permit. You don't have to get any zoning approval, okay? Those are permitted uses, and if you look at the chart, they're designated by a P, okay? Meaning permitted. The second use is let's talk about the conditional use. That's represented in the table with a C. A conditional use means you're allowed to have that use, but you have to do 2 things. One, you have to come to the planning commission first, and you have to show the planning commission how you meet the conditions that are in the ordinance with regard to your particular use. And one of the changes in our ordinance has been we've moved a number of permitted uses and new uses into the conditional use category, meaning the planning commission and ultimately the commissioners will now have more control over because they're conditional uses, more control over those particular uses. And there's many of them in that table. But the
Over 100.
over 100, okay.
100, okay.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, through Article 4.
And so those are conditional uses, and as I said, there are 2 aspects to it. One, you have to meet the conditions that are in the ordinance, but also you have to establish, or then the commissioners have the right to impose additional conditions for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, as long as they're reasonable. That's a conditional use. And the third use is called a special exception. Special exception is the exact same thing as a conditional use, only instead of the planning commission and the commissioners having the ultimate power, decision-making power, it goes to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board reviews a special exception. But those are your three uses. So by allowing something, unless it's allowed by right or permitted outright, you basically have to go through a administrative process in order to get your approvals. Does that help?
Extremely, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
And then each conditional use, like I said, has certain, like, there's general criteria that all conditional uses need to meet, and that's directly from the TAMPC. But then each use that has a C in the table also has, a section with an article for, and then lists the specific requirements for that specific conditional use.
And a lot of times, those conditions, you see it coming, the same things coming up again and again, which is people are concerned about lighting on certain uses, about noise is a big thing, traffic is a big thing, parking
Hours of
spaces.
operation even, like, you
hour-
can get really specific
Yes.
if you want to.
So that we tried to take each one of those conditional uses and come up with the things that would most likely be of concern to residents if that development were to go into their area.
Other question?
For me or her?
I'm not sure. I know the term grandfather.
Yeah.
Are there any properties or structures that have been grandfathered in this new layout that,
Sure.
that we maybe should be aware of, that we don't drive by and say they don't belong there?
Yeah, again, great question. So by law, we're required to provide for non-conforming uses, which our ordinance does. I don't think we made any major changes in the way we treat non-conforming uses between the old ordinance and the new ordinance. The concept behind grandfathering or recognizing non-conforming uses, it's pretty basic. But there are some nuances. But the basic idea is, if you had a building or you made a use of your property before the new ordinance went into effect, and it was allowed under the old ordinance, you would be permitted to continue that use under the new ordinance, even if the new ordinance changed the designation or made it, or prohibited that use. So you couldn't take somebody's right to use their property, you couldn't take that away if it was a lawful use under the old ordinance.
Okay,
So that's
that
the
I
concept.
understand. Again, of your knowledge, are any of those existing now that we
Yes.
would make notice to?
I'll ask Gwen. Gwen,
Do you
what do
mean, like, for example, the townhouses that are up on Ferndale? Is that something like that?
That's
Where
fine.
they had an approved plan already, and so then, that's ones, actually specific, we'd have to look at their conditional use approval to see what requirements there are, but
We don't-
if you had a house that didn't meet the new setbacks, you had this big house
Yes.
and it was right up against the road, you don't have to alter your house under this one, it's allowed to be the way it is.
Again, I understand that. So other than the townhouses you mentioned, you're not aware of? I
can't-
I really don't care, because I think that the commissioners do a very good job. And all this was put together, I'm sure thoroughly. Though I have been absent from the meetings here for a while, I do follow you. I'm just curious if was something just glaring out at us. Because there's
I don't
gonna
know
be
any of that
those
specifics,
instances.
or- Yeah,
I'm sure there's those instances.
I'm sure there are, I just can't think of anything off the top of my head
Okay.
that.
We weren't addressing any particular complaint or any particular structure or use.
Okay.
And I will say, the township really did go above and beyond. Gwen sent letters to any property owner that whose zoning was changing as part of this, which is actually, when you're doing a comprehensive update to your map, and you're not just changing certain, like doing an amendment and changing like 1 or 2 parcels, you actually don't have to notify the property owners when it's comprehensive.
Well,
But the township went kind of above and beyond the
Yeah, I
requirements
was notified.
to just make people aware and let them know.
Yeah, I was
so,
notified and I
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would have never expected that letter, to be quite honest with you. I know it takes a lot of extra time, because some of these changes here involve a lot of residents.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and we understand, I mean, obviously, we all understand that too, and, yeah, sometimes it's good to go above and beyond what's required and just do the right thing.
I have to say though, I got in a little bit of trouble because my notice came the day before my neighbor's notice came. And I had to hear about it. No, that's all right. Just, I don't know. Any other
there's some other
questions,
people
please
that-
just slap me in the back of the head.
Ta-
and I'll be
Tammy?
glad to stop.
Tammy, identify yourself.
Tammy Morrow, 2 Roads Avenue. I just want to know why we're changing, like, Redgate Road from 2 to 3.
Again, I'll let Laura answer that. Laura. Glenn, you might know what the thinking was.
And it's R2 now, is that correct?
No, it's 3.
No, it's R3.
This section here, Laura, is like, this is Rhodes Avenue, and so
Okay.
like, and he's in this section, so above Redgate on the map before it used to be R2,
Okay.
and now it's R3.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it had to do with the steep slope designation, the natural resource protection overlay, that tended to be, that's something that, with R3, you get larger lot size generally required, which allows people to work with the resource protection overlay so that they can put things in different parts of their property. It seemed to fit kind of the character of this whole part going down Redgate, was a little, those parcels often are larger and more, less developed, and so it just seemed to fit more with this kind of section that was already R3 and just kind of expanded it that way.
Anybody else?
I do.
Yes, please.
Patty Vecchio, 785 and 795 Redgate Road. I did not know this was going on today, but I'm kind of glad I'm here. Jim did submit a letter. We were R3. All right, my husband's telling me to be quiet for some reason. I'm not sure why it was changed. We borderline Masonic, but ours was changed zoning, if our kids want to build in the future.
So we got that letter, and originally your 2 parcels were slated to be in the R3. The change to R3, but then after we received the letter, it was still in time during our committee process, and we looked at it, and everyone agreed that it kind of made sense to just keep that as that district kind of a square, and so, your properties, both of them remained in the R2. So your properties did not change from the old map to the new map.
Right here.
Oh, so that long one up there is us, and the very narrow one would be 775.
The long narrow one is 775,
Okay.
and then these 2 are.
I apologize,
Yeah.
I looked at the one next to it and thought that was our rental 795, and then the one that came at a weird angle was us
Was you.
at 785.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for bringing that out.
Sure.
Good evening. Michael Monyock. I live at 334 Weber Road. I appreciate the commission's looking into future development and working up this comprehensive zoning amendment. However, I have some concerns about existing landowners and the significant restrictions that are being placed on them. For example, previously in the zoning ordinance, any structure under 100 feet was exempted from the accessory use definition. That's no longer permitted here. Any structure of any size is going to be considered an accessory structure. Also, accessory structures are limited to 1 per type. So if you want to put an addition onto your deck, for example, you can't do that because that would be considered two decks, which is no longer permitted under the zoning ordinance. For some reason, goats are not permitted anymore. Bees are allowed, but goats are not. So I'm just trying to understand what problems we're trying to solve with this zoning ordinance for existing structures and how this is accomplishing it. I didn't know we had a goat problem. I don't know anyone that owns a goat, but that's just one example of many that are in here. This is a 300-page legal document, and owners who had their zoning changed had about 30 days to review this. It sounds like it's been going on in the works for 18 months possibly, and this is the first time we actually had a chance to review it. Another example, grilling is now considered open burning. Open burning is a reference to the Township Fire Code. The Township Fire Code adopts the International Fire Code 2009 edition. I don't know if anybody's read that, but section 302.1 says you can't have any open flames within 25 feet of a structure. So does that now mean we can't grill within 25 feet of our structure? I think that's probably an inconsistency. Maybe I'm interpreting that wrong, but my point is this is a very long document, and it's difficult to understand what exactly all the changes are, and I think the commission should probably do a better job of communicating to all the landowners exactly what the impacts are to them as individuals. Another question I've had is why is the performance standards for the planned residential development now gone from the zoning ordinance? For example, the old zoning ordinance had a 25-foot yard or 25-foot buffer yard requirement at the perimeter of the PRD. That's no longer going to be an obligation for the townhomes, for the manor going forward. Anyone who lives bordering the manor understands that that buffer zone is important for restricting the glare and noise from all the activity that goes on in that manor. So again, I'd ask that the township provide at least some further guidance for the homeowners as to what the impacts are going to be for them. Not necessarily for future development, we understand the need for that, but for existing landowners and what they can and cannot do with their property. 300 pages is difficult to read through in 30 days and figure out exactly what you're now allowed and not allowed to do on your own property. So, thank you.
So you've actually raised a number of separate items, many of which we did consider and many of which we attempted to deal with. So I'm going to let Laura talk about that.
Sure.
In terms of the procedure that we followed, we had every planning commission, the planning commission met almost every month for the last year. And I'd say 90% of what we discussed at those meetings, which are open meetings, was the ordinance and the proposed changes. So again, this was not a secret process. I agree with you, 300 pages is a lot to digest. If you have to digest it along with the 52 comments made by the county planning department, your eyes glaze over and you're ready to fall asleep in about an hour. So I understand that, but I can't think of a better way than to handle the openness and the transparency of the process than the process we followed. We tried to be very transparent, and we tried to be as open as we could about that process. But Laura, I'll let Laura address, because you did raise a lot of good questions, and I'd like Laura to deal with that.
So I'll touch, I guess, first on the accessory dwelling units. We did talk extensively about that, I think, and I think, a lot of times you'll have certain property owners that have, multiple sheds or multiple garages or something like that. So that specific, can only have one type, you can have one type of each. So I think the example you raised, sir, was, if you wanted to build an addition onto your deck, I think you could certainly add onto your deck. It would be, I think that would still be considered one,
We
accessory
were
structure,
basically concerned
right?
with one shed, now I need another shed, now I need another shed,
Yeah.
and before you know it, you've got 4 or 5 sheds or.
Like, and how to draw that line or where to limit it.
So that was the
yeah.
focus. It wasn't on building an extension on your deck.
Yeah, so-
Right, but that's still covered under the ordinance now. So that's a specific example, but that's just one of many.
Go ahead, Laura, go ahead.
And then goats, I don't know.
That's, I mean, I don't care about goats, honestly.
Okay.
I'm just asking why, you know, in this 300-page
Yeah.
document, we're singling out goats among many other things that we can and can't do.
Yeah, so goats are allowed, I think, but only in R3 now. I don't know if they were ever really allowed or just something that was sort of accepted, or if there any even exist. We know a lot of people have chickens, and there's currently no chicken regulations, so they will now be compliant. In terms of the open burning, that's pretty standard procedure to follow the fire code. And that's usually the language we put in there.
The other thing about that, I know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So the open
there's
burning
only
law,
two
as I
references.
recall, it's the Allegheny County Health Department regulates open burning, and well, right, and their requirements are, they accept from that grilling specifically.
Oh, you
So if
would
you're cooking, so if you're
consider
cooking,
cooking to
Yeah,
be
but that's
burning,
not what the
would you?
zoning ordinance says right now.
I'm sorry.
Again, that's my
The
point.
zoning ordinance just says it's subject to the fire code.
Yeah.
And we could add health department in there too, if that helps to cover it.
But the zoning ordinance does not include grilling. It says open burning, am I correct?
Yeah, and then there's a definition for open burning.
Which I believe does not, if it follows the fire code, does not
Include
include
grilling.
grilling or cooking.
Yeah.
And that one I know pretty well.
that's my understanding is for a number of reasons, you're gonna be allowed to grill.
Yeah, so we can look at that definition. It says any fire or combustion from which air contaminants pass directly into the open air without passing through a flue. The term includes any fire or combustion which occurs in a chimney, fire pit, outdoor fireplace, or grill. So it does say grill in the
Doesn't follow the fire
definition. So, I don't know if that, we can check to see if that's consistent.
Well, then
with the
that's
fire
definitely something we should look at tweaking.
code.
I totally
Because I don't
agree.
think the
Yeah.
intent was to.
It wasn't.
People can't grill, obviously.
And that's not my larger point, though. There's a lot of unintended consequences on this, and I'm not sure it's been fully vetted, at least by,
Oh, it's been vetted.
everyone involved, homeowners mostly.
And then I
And
think
that's what's
that's,
difficult about trying to sift through this 300-page document without understanding a little bit further about why all these changes are necessary.
and then the PRD getting eliminated, that was really the planning commission and board kind of
Well, I
coming
think that-
together and agreeing that they felt that there was enough of that type of,
Yeah, Gwen,
large PRD developments.
Gwen, jump in if I'm misstating it, but my understanding with the PRD is that there really isn't room for another PRD in Aleppo Township. And so the idea is, we already have one PRD, and that there's probably not enough space or enough open area for any others, and so we just decided to take it out.
No, I understand that there probably isn't room for another PRD, but what about the existing performance standards for the PRD we have?
Well,
That
they would
was
be
eliminated.
subject to
Well,
their approved PRD that they have.
correct.
and the
So that's
regulations
already
that we're
done.
discussing.
So the zoning ordinance doesn't, wouldn't deal with things that are already approved and already in operation. That those are gonna be essentially grandfathered into what's there now. Now, if they violate something under their PRD approval, then obviously they're subject to being violated and we can enforce that. But their approval is already years done. So those conditions for how they operate are already in place.
So they'll be subject to those performance standards indefinitely.
The ones that they got approved on, not under the new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless they are health, safety, welfare, but not as defined in the zoning ordinance. So if we passed an ordinance tomorrow saying, there's a new speed limit in the manor, that could be enforced under the new ordinance, but not under the new zoning ordinance. I know it gets complicated, believe me, I live with it. Others? I think, how about the board? Commissioners, I think this would be a good time, appropriate time for questions from the commissioners.
I have one quick one, Ron. The grandfathering of ordinance, does that carry with the property at sale?
As long, yes. So as long as, the time where you get into issues with non-conforming use is usually if you try to change from one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. So the use may be different or arguably different, that's an issue. If you decide to expand or grow a use beyond what was initially approved, that can become an issue in terms of grandfathering. But if you are just going to continue the use, it doesn't matter who owns the property. The use moves with the property, just like a variance moves with the property, not the ownership.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Laura, anything you want to add? No. So I'd like to have those exhibits made part of the record that we identified earlier. We'll also make a draft of the zoning ordinance, a additional exhibit. And I think we probably want to include, do we want to include the county comments as an exhibit? We'll also include the comments from the Allegheny County Planning Department that we received and that we're in the process of addressing. We'll make those part of the record as well. Okay, with that, I think we can continue the hearing. We'll continue it for 45 days, and, well, specifically until August 15th, 2022, at which time the commissioners will consider adopting the ordinance and any proposed changes, assuming that those changes are minor changes and not major revisions. Oh, it'll be on the 15th at 7:00 p.m. at our regular monthly legislative meeting. Any other questions? Okay, with that, the hearing is closed. Oh, no, continued. Continued.
You're in a hurry, right?
I'd love to close it.
And the meeting is reopened. Do I hear a motion to approve the workshop meeting minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. As you may have noted, I asked the chief if he had better things to do. He did. But Gwen, I think you can elaborate on this, but last week we had somebody come in concerned about speeding on Redgate and tractor trailers on Redgate. True?
Sure.
We've communicated with the police. We'll continue to communicate with the police. And originally, the resident had asked if we would consider 8-hour shifts on Redgate. And we tried to explain there's a financial consequence to that sort of thing. But we did extract from the chief that 4-hour time periods are the minimum. It'd be $288 per 4-hour time period. And I think the commissioners will consider expanding some of our traffic control times. Gwen, do you have anything to add?
That's what I had to add. Our public works crew went through and cleared away some of the branches from around the signs that exist to make sure that they're easy to see. And they hung a speed monitoring sign, the one that we have, the electronic sign on that portion of Redgate today, just to start. That's a visual that helps drivers slow down.
And I believe the resident has talked to PennDOT about signage and other ways to redirect tractor trailers.
Yes, PennDOT said they told this resident that they were gonna come out and take a look at the signs that existed and see if there's anything they could add.
So we're gathering facts, it's under review, it's ongoing. Emergency management.
No report, status quo.
Public Works.
Good evening.
For the record, Tim.
Oh, Tim Scott, Public Works Supervisor. I don't, did they get all, everybody get a copy, or I know I got it. I was off last week, so you got your copies late. Not a lot to talk about, really. We patched a lot of potholes recently. Probably noticed all the water weeds cut back along Glen Mitchell Road. Cleaned off catch basins. Any questions? Not a whole lot to discuss.
Good job.
You look like you had a question, like you were thinking about something.
You like your new mower?
Pardon me?
Do you like your new mower?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I was telling Dawn about it. Thank you.
Communications.
No report.
Planning and zoning. Is there a motion to appoint Nicholas Kahn?
So moved.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Gwen, would you again give a little background on Nicholas?
He's a resident of South McCoy, and we have a vacancy on the planning commission. And so this motion is to appoint Nicholas Kahn to the planning commission for the balance of the term ending December 31st, 2024. He's been an Aleppo resident for, I think he said 5 or 6 years, and has a little bit of a knowledge about properties just due to his work he works in the mortgage industry, so he has some awareness of property stuff, and he expressed an interest in serving on the planning commission. We had a vacancy because an existing member moved out of the township and was no longer able to be on the planning commission.
And he came to last week's meeting and gave a presentation. He seems like a fine young man.
Yeah.
So any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Tax collector treasurer.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Clayton Stube, Treasurer Tax Collector. Provided Gwen with my monthly report, which you should have. For the month of May, we ended up collecting $105,630.71 in total taxes. On pages 3 and 4 are your monthly comparisons, your year-to-date comparisons. We're doing quite well as far as tax collection goes, so all pointed good, so we can maintain and obviously do a lot of the things that we need to take care of. As far as the ending account balances, you have in the PNC checking account $548,985.70. In our investment accounts, the state fund, you have $61,634.24. The general investment fund has $1,465,776.96. The reserve fund has $112,779.34. And then the capital improvement fund has $952,456.62. So total monies on hand is $3,141,632.86. However, we have obligations, so you have to subtract out the pledged funds and the targeted funds, and when you do that, you have net operating funds of $2,014,762.66. We also have two accounts. One is the sewer bond account, which has $588,750.34, and then the newest investment account for stormwater has $172,443.45. Any questions? Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Finance, do I hear a motion to approve the May bill list, et cetera?
Move that we approve the May bill list in the amount of $143,341.62, to ratify May prepaid bills in the amount of $13,203.06, and to ratify May payroll transfers in the amount of $16,700.61.
You have a second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Aleppo Township Authority.
No report.
Quaker Valley Ambulance Authority.
No report.
Quaker Valley COG.
Executive Director's report of our
for our meeting is available. That's the only thing I have to point out to people. Do I hear a motion to adopt a resolution in regard to the glass recycling?
Motion to adopt a resolution of the Township of Aleppo entering into a joint glass recycling program with Quaker Valley Council of Governments beginning July 1st, 2022.
Is there
Second.
any further discussion? Gwen, would you give a brief explanation, please?
Sure, this would be for Aleppo to enter into an agreement with Quaker Valley and COG for the glass recycling bins that are currently in Sewickley and in Avalon. That they're open to all Aleppo residents because we're members of the COG, and then you can go and take your glass recycling to either one of these bins. And this covers the cost of that operation, and I think it works out for us to be $40 a month to participate
Should the
in that.
resolution reflect the dollar amount?
Yes.
Still undetermined?
It says based on population, and our population group is the $40 amount.
Okay.
Any additional questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Solicitor,
No report?
you've done well. Gwen, would you report on the property complaint at 795 Redgate Road?
We received, someone came in and spoke about a complaint that they had about this parcel. Last week, we had received a written complaint several months ago, and so we requested that the building inspector make a final determination. The complaint had been being handled over the last couple of months, and, progress was made. And so we got an initial report from the building inspector, and we'll be looking that over.
Any further discussion?
I do. My name is Patty Vecchio, and I own 785 and 795 Redgate. You all know my husband Jim, who works for the Public Works Township. So last week during your workshop, our adjacent neighbor complained about 795 Redgate, saying that it was a full-blown construction operation there, which is really untrue. We've had several complaints from this neighbor about 785 Redgate and 795 Redgate over the years. This one is he's just being relentless and not letting go, saying that 795 is a construction zone. There were trucks up there. Our renter that is in there currently, he started renting in September of 2020, so he's been there about a year and a half. He does have a business. It's a masonry and a restoration business. It's not a full-blown construction. He does have vehicles for his company, 2 pickup trucks and a dump truck. They all have his logos on there. They were all parked at 795 Redgate. When the complaint come in, Gwen, anytime a complaint comes in, Gwen has talked to Jim about this, and Jim's talked to the renter immediately. So any issue was very timely. Our adjacent neighbor was saying that it wasn't timely, but really it has been, and we thought the resolution was pretty quickly on there. As far as the trucks go, he has since removed the dump truck in one of his trucks. There will always be a truck up there with his logo, because not only is it his work truck, it is also his personal vehicle, so he's always going to have one of them up there. As far as trucks being serviced up there, these trucks are all new, and they've never been serviced. Gwen has seen the trucks when she was up there, one of them, and they've never been serviced as was stated last week. So I just want to, as of last week, give facts and not assumptions, so the whole board can see there's always 2 sides of the story, and I'd like you to see our side of that story. So that's why I'm here with my husband's support, but I kind of asked him to not talk and let me do the talking. It's better that way. So hence, I'm representing the Vecchios. And people in this room would agree with that, so here I am. And I wrote some things down just because I didn't want to miss some things that were talked about. Gwen was on site. She did an inspection before the workshop last week and said that she did not see any construction except for the tarp with the sand. And our adjacent owner kind of negated that, and you had asked if he was in disagreement with Gwen, and he said yes, she was there to observe that. So then it was the code enforcement officer was going to go make his report, and if he found that there was nothing there, it was going to be a closed deal. Our neighbor was not very happy with that and thought that there should be other steps taken. I mean, he's complained so much that we feel that we are being harassed, but that is a total different issue. But I want to mention some comments. I've looked at that video and watched that video numerous times. And some of his comments were that our rental was run by one of your employees, referring to Jim. So I think in his, and I was like, why is he saying all this? But in his talk, he was assuming that Jim was the kingpin or the operator of this operation, and one of our sons was living at our rental home, being also with the construction, and all these vehicles were his. And that is not true. He also stated that an employee is in the center of a violation of one of your codes. He was referring to the board, you know, you're going sort of soft and mushy on the whole thing. And Jim and I don't feel that that's true. Gwen has approached Jim every time there's been a complaint, and we've approached our renter on that. Again, I think he thought that was our son, and I think when he quoted, is it his children, to Gwen, she said no. So he didn't take that as a correct answer, and he said his children are not involved. She said no. So he restated it, he got the same answer. We have 4 sons. None of them have ever lived at 795 Redgate Road. It's been a rental property since we bought the place in 2003. Our adjacent neighbor wanted that property also, and their previous renters had sold it to us. So since then, we've had many complaints, and we feel we have been harassed, but Jim and I have never done a complaint about our neighbor. He's done several from both of our properties. So if he has a torch for us, it really needs to stop, because it is really getting out of hand. And I talked to my renter prior to coming here, and he said that, you know, his fiance, they have an infant child, and she is feeling very uneasy just sitting on her porch because an elderly gentleman is driving very slowly, checking out her property. Now, I'm not going to assume who it is because I don't know, but if I want to guess, I could. But I won't do that. So she's feeling very unsafe in our rental home, and I don't want to have a renter feeling unsafe. I mean, our adjacent neighbor knows more about my rental, I think, than I do. So if it is this gentleman, I please ask that he stop going very slowly and making my renter feel very uncomfortable in the rental home. So we just want it to stop. And when the code enforcer does the final inspection, and he says that it's not a construction site, there are no vehicles up there now. The renter did redo a fire pit, and the masonry work is wonderful. So look at that and see the artist work that's in the pit, not the fires, which the one thing I have to agree is there were fires in that pit. He was burning like Amazon boxes and things like that, and there was smoke. When he got the complaint, Jim went up that night and talked to him about that. So he knows not to build any more fires in that pit. So we hope when the code enforcement officer does his final review and says that it's not a construction site, that he takes it for that, and this is going to be over, because we do feel harassed. And, you know, we're not going to do anything about it. We are quiet neighbors. We just want to live our life on Redgate Road and move on. So I just wanted you to know it's not our children. My husband is not involved. He only has a full-time job with the borough, and our renter moved in September of 2020. And, you know, our neighbor said that he thought we had a landscaping business up there. Well, Jim got a permit, which I have here, to grade that land, because renters, it was a sharp driveway, renters were actually going over the driveway into the yard. So that's why Jim got a grading permit to add more dirt. And our adjacent neighbor thought that we were selling dirt. And then he said that our renter put in another driveway. That's been there, and the building permit was before our renter we even knew of him. We didn't know him until he rented. So there's a lot of misconceptions, and we just want it to be done. We really do. So we're asking that once The final report is in, and if we're in violation, we will take care of it in 30 days. That's a given. But if they find that it's not a construction zone, we really ask that this be dropped because we've had enough. We really have. So I thank you all for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Yes?
Just a comment. About midway through your dissertation, you made the comment that I guess he thought your cars were being serviced on that property?
Yes.
And your comment was that they're all new? So
They're
they
all
would be
brand new
serviced?
trucks and he's never had them serviced. And, I mean, like I said,
However, that opens the box for him to say, well, what's going to happen when they are no longer new? So I would take that part of the comment out.
Okay. He has since found a property to store all of this, and they're no longer at 795 Redgate. He talked to an owner a couple months ago, but it was a little bit of delay in getting that property ready. So as of now, like I said, it is just his truck up there. Anything will not be serviced. There's no equipment. There is his fire ring, and I believe still some sand under a tarp, but.
My intent is don't open a new can of worms.
Worms. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Thank you. I don't want to do that. So I really thank you for that input. Any other questions? No? We'll just wait for the report and go from
We
there.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional comments on the property complaint? Nancy Drive cat complaint.
I spoke to the property owner. I don't have any substantive information to report. She's still working on trying to find assistance with people that will come out and help her trap the cats so that they can be taken to be spayed and neutered. Apparently there were a couple new litters of kittens born there and some of them were taken away, but I gave her another reference of a person in the township who works with animal rescue and, advised her that this person was willing to talk to her and try to work with her. So she said she was hopefully gonna be trapping this weekend or trying to trap and get one animal spayed or neutered as she could. But it was more of a check-in phone call, but I really don't have any, she did not have any progress to report yet.
Thank you. Any other comments? New business. Citizen participation.
I'll reintroduce myself, Art Capuzzi, Weber Road. You'll be surprised. I want to thank the township and the commissioners for waste management's extended program to pick up hazardous materials. I've been using it extensively. They're very courteous when you call them. They're very timely when they pick it up. They give you all the supplies you need to bag it all properly. I know it's a monetary cost to the township. I'm glad you extended it when you did. And I was just wanted to thank you for that service and comment on how well, at least it worked for me. Secondly, that little stripe that you put down Weber Road, as strange as it might seem, I think it had some effect on the speeding of the traffic. The only problem being is it's wearing out now, so the people are...
All of our yellow lines need repainted now.
Okay, but I appreciate it. Other people may not think so, but I believe it did make some effect on the speed. Some people want to slow down to stay on the proper side of the line. The third one would be, it's more question, weight limit on Weber Road. Has anything ever been established?
When?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what month, but a couple of months ago, that ordinance was adopted.
Okay.
And so there is a weight limit set for Weber and some of the other streets at the top of the Weber neighborhood. And what it does is require anyone hauling large quantities or more than one trip of something like that, so like in construction, they will now have to bond the road to.
Okay.
Has the signage been installed?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I didn't
don't
notice
even-
any.
I'll have to, yeah, I don't think we put any signs up, but I would have to, we're
I
gonna
know
have to
the
check with the
ordinance was
ordinance to see
passed.
what we can put up.
Okay. Do you know offhand the limit?
I don't, and I don't have
Okay.
that in front of me.
That's all right. This one's kind of way off, but do we have a engine retarding brake ordinance in the township?
We do not.
We do, okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. My wife and I have used the hazardous waste disposal also. It's wonderful. And I think it's $1 a month per person, something like that.
Well, all the information is on the handout that they give us yearly. All you gotta do is open it, get the phone number. It works beautifully.
And when you call for the service, they're there. Thank you very much. Any other citizen participation?
Tammy Morrow, 2 Rhodes Avenue. I was listening to the meeting from last week, and David, he had talked about the trucks coming down our road. Big trucks. And they're always they get down so far, and then they stop by my driveway, so they have to turn around. Is there some kind of...
You're talking about Red Gate?
Red Gate.
Okay, you're not
Red
talking about
Gate.
Rhodes Avenue.
Well, I'm right on the corner, so that's where
Okay.
they're trying to turn around in there, those big tractor trailers. So, I know Bill had to fix a couple of the water lines that they had broken there, and they're like running into the hillside. But it's so dangerous for them to come down that way. That's what they're turning around, yeah, in there. And I talked to the chief just now, and he said probably the only thing would be signage, because it's not worth him sitting there, because we might not have a truck for another month go down there to have a police officer sit there. But is there some way we can have some kind of bigger signage there? I know that's how the GPS, because the guy that just got lost, that's how the GPS is taking him down there.
Yeah.
So, and it's really dangerous.
I'll let Gwen detail, but there has been a discussion with PennDOT, because that is a state road, correct?
Mhm.
They're going to evaluate. They might even come out and do a study. We also talked very briefly about a sign before the stop sign on Merriman,
That's a good idea.
because it's afterwards and you can't see it.
Right.
And Amazon has been notified several times, and you're absolutely right. GPS doesn't necessarily know the details of the road.
Right.
So they send them the shortest route.
There is a way, however, George, I just discovered this, and I'd be willing to look into how to do it, to notify Google Maps, Apple Maps, there's 3 of them, of an unsafe directional thing for their system, and they will change it. We just did it for a situation where they were guiding people through a private driveway, not realizing, because it used to have a road name, and we were able to update that as not a preferred short route.
Can you investigate that?
I will find that out, yes. It
Thank you.
took 2 or 3 months to get Google Maps, they just dropped it within the last week, so it worked.
Thank you.
And Gwen, could you elaborate on the discussion with PennDOT?
I didn't speak to PennDOT directly, but Dave Von Canel, contacted PennDOT about the signs, and he called 1-800-FIX-ROAD, which we always, like to just keep saying, I know you're aware of it, Tim, that the more that they hear from different residents, it seems the more impact it has, versus just me calling. Like, if everyone calls and says the similar things,
Right.
it gets more attention. And he got ahold of somebody at PennDOT Signs who said that they were gonna come out and take a look at the signs that existed, and then ones that didn't see what other ones could be added. And then we would talk about, permission to put up on Merriman here, another bigger sign saying, no, do not turn here, tractor trailers, you will die, or whatever.
Yeah,
You know,
'cause as soon as they
something going
turn-
down that hill.
As soon as they turn, they're
They
stopped.
They get most of the way down, and then they
Yeah.
panic, because it's
I
that
would
one
too.
lane bridge at the bottom and everything.
I would
So-
too.
Maybe the
Yeah.
sign should say no truck outlet.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes,
Something that
something.
says, yeah.
And then I also had talked to the chief, because he left, so I wanted to talk to him, about maybe not staying right by Mr. Causey's house to catch traffic. We have 2 sets of white lines, one down on Redgate Road and one by Mr. Causey's. And they're always sitting by Mr. Causey's, so they know that he's sitting there. So now when they get past the new house that was built down there, they're flying. So, and I'm right on the corner right there. And I mean, if you're out gardening or something, you're going to get hit. And it's usually around 3 o'clock when Masonic Homes lets out.
I think if you recall the discussion we had last week, I asked if there was a specific issue after the request for an 8-hour shift.
Right.
It seems to me that the tractor trailers and the speeding are the specific issue.
Yes.
So the first thing we did was get a price for the 4-hour, and I talked to the chief before he left also. Is it best to have it at 8 o'clock in the morning one day and 4 o'clock 2 days later? No, what's?
Well, I think you're going to have to alternate it like that because they get so used to them sitting there. Say they're sitting there at 7 o'clock. Well, 3 days they're sitting there again at 7 o'clock.
Right.
I think if you rotate
Right.
it to different things, I think it
So
would be better.
That's under discussion. He's
Okay.
thinking about it. We have the
Okay.
price. And I do think, my own personal opinion is the commissioners will approve a certain amount of money beyond our contract to deal with the issue.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Any other comments regarding Redgate? Any other citizens? I appreciate everybody being here. We miss you.
Hey,
All the participation is really great.
yeah, you know, life brings about some other things that tend to be more important at that time.
Yes,
But I've been keeping an eye on
that's good.
it, yeah.
And Tim, you'll redo the lines, so the lines will get redone.
We just bought a case of paint to do the lines.
Good.
Therefore, meeting adjourned.
I'll stand on my